A single temptation can ruin the rest of your life. Ansrin had no idea how much fun it would be to dance in front of the camera with her daughter, the rising TikTok star Mahek Bukhari. The promising TikTok star, known under the pseudonym May, was 24 years old, and her mother Ansrin was 44. Mother and daughter once appeared together in a cute dance video in which they moved to rhythmic music at the same time. The video received a huge number of views, and all the viewers commented that the two looked more like sisters than like mother and daughter. As a result, Ansrin gained some fame and began to appear more often in commercials and live broadcasts together with her daughter. One day, May and her mother were watching the comments during a broadcast, reading the chat, and answering questions from viewers. One of the commenters, obviously using a fake account, asked May to have her mother call him. May just laughed about it. She did not notice how her mother's face twitched at that moment. After apologizing to the viewers, the woman went to the bathroom, where she nervously held the phone to her ear. She begged the person on the other end of the line to stop bothering her and to leave her daughter out of it. She even threatened to call the police, but the caller would not calm down. Somehow he had obtained the phone number of Ansrin's husband and offered to send him a hot video of his wife. The woman's heart almost jumped out of her chest. She immediately found these messages on her husband's phone. Fortunately, he paid no attention to them because he thought they were just more spam. The Bukhari family became quite famous on social networks thanks to May, who set up an account and regularly showed her loved ones on TikTok. She presented the image of a proper, religious family, and now her entire career was in danger because of her mother. It could also have ruined Ansrin's marriage and destroyed her future, at least that was the threat she received in a new text message on her phone. One click, and everything would collapse: her marriage, her daughter's career, her own reputation, and her social status. But as it turns out, Ansrin and her daughter May were determined to do anything to prevent this, even if it meant harming a few people. This story happened relatively recently in Stoke-on-Trent in Staffordshire, in the United Kingdom. There is an internet platform called Azar, similar to Chatroulette, where you can meet and talk to different people from all over the world. Users can set filters based on their preferences, such as geographic location, gender, age, and so on. The platform became very popular during the pandemic, when people were stuck at home. One day, Ansrin's niece came to visit. While the woman took care of the household, her niece sat in the living room and had a video chat with a young man in his 20s from the UK. The niece was proud that her relatives were popular on TikTok and proudly told her conversation partner that her cousin was the famous blogger May, and that she was now visiting them. She even turned the camera around and showed the young man her aunt, Ansrin, to prove she was not making it up and that the niece really was at the Bukhari's home. The niece mentioned that this was May's mother, and the clips in which she danced with her daughter had attracted many viewers. The woman waved at the camera, smiled, and then went back to her tasks. She did not think seriously about this form of remote communication and did not listen to what the teenager was talking about. May did not want to become famous only in the UK, she did everything to become famous worldwide. She danced to trending songs, used various video techniques, and tried every possible way to stand out. May even persuaded her mother to dance with her, and it worked. Videos featuring Ansrin were viewed and commented on 100 times more often, and the TikTokers began involving not only her mother but also her brother and even her father in the recordings. Her father did not appear in the videos that often, since he was not really interested in youth trends and seemed quite serious in them. But overall, it all looked cute and fit the image of a beautiful, loving family. May claimed to be a devout Muslim, wrote a lot about her faith, talked about morality and society, and described how much she loved and appreciated her mother, who was her best friend and sister. But her main interest, her ultimate goal, was to become a fashion influencer. May dreamed of advertising fashion outfits on her social media accounts. She wanted famous companies to send her clothes that she would tag on her page. She already had several offers, but she dreamed of more. At that time, with 126,000 followers, she made money promoting brands and participating in major events in the UK. She was also invited to promote local restaurants, bars, and especially hookah lounges. In doing so, she always took her mother with her, because the image of her conservative family did not allow her to go alone to all these entertainment venues, and her mother was also her best friend. May even persuaded her mother, Ran, to set up her own social media account, believing that with her mother's number of fans, she too could earn money through advertising. Perhaps that was exactly what Ansrin had dreamed of. She was 44 years old and worked as a manager at a security firm. Her whole life, someone else had made decisions for her. As a teenager, she had wanted to become a flight attendant, but her parents told her they had found a man for her to marry and have children with. She did exactly that. She was reasonably happy in the marriage, but she never had that adolescent phase of experiencing a wide range of emotions where new opportunities could make her head spin. She was thrown out of being a teenager directly into the life of a housewife. Outwardly, everything was perfect for Ansrin. She had everything one could only dream of: her own house, a wonderful, hard-working husband who fully supported the family, and grown children. But lately, she felt especially good when she went to bars, met young people who were full of energy and carefree, wearing bright, cheerful clothes. She was thrilled by this new life. She set up her own account and regularly checked her posts. One day, she noticed a comment from a follower. The man's name was Saki Hussein, and his appearance somehow seemed familiar to her. It was the same man with whom her niece had chatted by video when she visited. His comment was innocent enough, but Ansrin sensed that there was more behind it. A conversation began between her and Saki, which then turned into daily phone calls. They talked up to 5 times a day when her husband was not at home. It felt like the sweet small talk of teenage lovers. No matter what the woman was doing, Saki was always on the other end of the line. May knew her mother was talking to some guy, but she did not pay much attention to it, thinking they were just friends. It never occurred to her that the two were having an affair. Saki was in good physical shape, but most importantly, he was literally obsessed with her. According to him, he had just celebrated his 27th birthday. Ansrin was 44, a 17-year age difference that did not seem too big. As an adult woman, she felt flattered by the attention of a younger man. Saki was an adult, so it seemed there was nothing going on except a moral conflict. But in reality, Saki had lied. He was 18 when they started communicating, but he did everything he could to appear older and tried his best to please his beloved. He would suddenly show up at a hookah lounge or a bar where Ansrin and her daughter were helping to promote the venue and paid for them. He sent her gifts to her home, which she had to open in front of the entire family and pretend she had simply ordered them online. Eventually their relationship changed. They could not see each other often, as they lived in different cities, and Ansrin was married with 2 children, so she did not want to arouse suspicion. But when they met in hotels in Birmingham and London, things became increasingly obvious. Even when they had video calls, sparks flew that could set everything on fire. They often had intimate affairs from miles apart, and it was a thrilling, scandalous affair in which, essentially, Ansrin was always on a knife's edge. She could be caught, and the consequences would be devastating. It turned out that this was actually Ansrin's second affair since her marriage. The first was with a married man who also had children. They understood each other in that sense and did not need more than a physical connection. Both cheated on their partners but did not want to destroy their families. It was like a pressure valve for them. But Saki was different. He was not married, had no children, was young, hot, and madly in love with Ansrin. She was his ultimate goal. After 2 years of this affair, the woman decided to leave him. She met him in a hotel and told him she wanted to focus on her marriage. She was tired of the constant tension and felt guilty before her husband and children. She could no longer lead a double life. The lovers spent one last night together, and the next morning it was as if there had been no conversation at all. Saki began sending messages and clung to her with all his might. Now that he knew she was leaving, he did everything to keep her. He called her 5 to 10 times a day and asked her what she was doing and where she was going. Her timid attempts to explain that her husband was becoming suspicious were unsuccessful, but that did not stop Saki. As soon as he sensed that she was distancing herself, he sent pictures of designer items he had ordered for her and had them delivered to her house. Even when she refused them, claiming she did not need anything, he ignored her protest and kept buying gifts. At the same time, he began to lose his temper whenever she refused his surprises. Finally, in December 2021, the woman summoned her resolve and broke up with him for good. She expected curses, endless phone calls, and angry messages, and was even mentally prepared for them. She hoped that sooner or later he would calm down or get bored and go his own way. But instead, Saki sent explicit photos and videos of their intimate calls and then flooded her with messages saying he would forward them to her husband or, worse still, post them online if she did not respond. Ansrin felt there was only one way out of this situation. At this point, her daughter May, the aspiring influencer, had no idea what was going on behind her back. She had no idea who was posting explicit fake videos with her face on the internet that were ruining her life and her reputation. They looked so realistic that those who did not know her personally took it all at face value. It was particularly hurtful because May had built her career as a religious, multifaceted woman. The fake photos and videos would have destroyed everything she had spent so long building. Even her friends began to ask questions, trying to figure out what was going on. At first, she could not imagine that her mother was to blame. In December 2021, after breaking up with Saki, Ansrin mustered the courage to tell her daughter everything. The woman did not do this to ease her conscience but to ask for help in a difficult situation that she had created with her own hands. She felt she had no choice because she was trapped by her own desires. At first, May exploded in anger and went after her mother for betraying her father, thus risking not only her own life but also that of those around her. Then her rage shifted to Saki. May walked around the living room growing angrier and angrier because the guy was a big threat to her family and to her entire career, which she had worked so hard for. She was determined to do anything to prevent the negative fallout from her mother's secret affair. May assured her mother that she would deal with Saki herself. Her friends would take care of him, and after that he would not even dare say the name Ansrin out loud. May set in motion a plan that would send 8 people to prison. First, she called her best friend, 29-year-old Rikan Carvin. She told him she was being blackmailed and asked him for help and protection. Rikan had no idea that it involved May's mother and that in reality she was the one being blackmailed. He agreed to mediate between his friend and the blackmailer. During a meeting with the blackmailer, Rikan found out that he demanded £3,000 for leaving the Bakaris in peace. The blackmailer claimed he had spent that much money while they were in a good relationship and wanted that money back. Now May and her friends had a difficult decision to make. How should they deal with Zaki without getting in trouble? After much thought, they decided on a car-based approach. They contacted the blackmailer, arranged to meet him in the parking lot of a well-known supermarket, and promised to bring him the entire sum. The meeting was set for 1:30 at night, when the parking lot would be empty. The supermarket was located roughly halfway between the cities where the lovers lived. Zaki agreed, not knowing that not only the Bakari women would be there but also a few others. On February 11, 2022, May, Ansrin, Rikan, and 5 other friends split into 2 cars and drove to the deserted supermarket parking lot. They deliberately parked the cars far apart so there would be room to maneuver. At first, not all the friends were clear about why they had really come there. Rikan and another friend got out of the limousine, trying to make it look as though the women had come alone. Presumably they planned to jump on the blackmailer right there in the parking lot. However, there were a few things they had not foreseen. First, the man did not show up alone. Zaki hated to drive, so he asked his friends, but no one was interested in driving to another city in the middle of the night. At the last minute, his good friend Hashim Ijazuddin agreed to keep him company. Hashim was the sort of person who was always ready to help, though he had no idea that his buddy was involved in blackmail. He thought it would be fun to drive at night, listen to music, and chat with his friend. Hashim and Zaki drove into the parking lot shortly before the agreed time and had a gut feeling that something strange was going on, that Ansrin and May might be setting them up. They did not even bother to stop or get out of the car to engage in a physical confrontation. They just did a loop around the lot and got onto the highway. At that moment, a blue limousine followed them, and then an Audi that belonged to the Bakaris. During the chase, May called Zaki from her mother's phone and told him what she intended to do with him that night. A video camera at a gas station recorded how the cars tore down the highway. From the outside, it looked like the blue limousine was chasing Hashim's silver Skoda, and the Audi was chasing the limousine. They were driving about 160 kilometers per hour, which looked very dangerous. Shortly after his conversation with May, Zaki dialed the emergency number and reported that his and Hashim's car was being chased. He tried to explain to the dispatcher that 2 cars were following them and trying to block them on the road. The operator suggested that Zaki drive urgently to the nearest police station, but unfortunately they had no opportunity to do so. The transcript of the phone call shows that the dispatcher did not believe Zaki. She asked him why he thought they were being followed. The frightened man told her that the faces of the people chasing them were hidden behind balaclavas, and that he feared for his life and for that of his friend Hashim, who was driving. He could not name their exact location. The emergency operator kept asking questions while the blue limousine ran the Skoda from behind, and the Audi struck from the side. Then there was a rumble, and the connection broke off. At 1:30 a.m., Hashim and Zaki's car skidded off the road at full speed, collided with a guardrail, flew over it, crashed into a tree, broke into two pieces, and immediately caught fire. The two other cars, the blue limousine and the Audi, continued on the highway until they pulled into a nearby parking lot, where surveillance cameras recorded two people getting out, inspecting the vehicles for possible damage, then getting back in and driving in the opposite direction. All 8 people looked from their windows at the huge fire breaking out at the crash site, but none of them thought to call the emergency services to save the young men who were burning to death there. As it turned out later, by that time Ansrin had collapsed in her seat, sobbing uncontrollably, while May tried to console her. The blue limousine and the Audi parked in a nearby neighborhood. All the passengers got out, and the 7 of them took a walk through the streets, as if they wanted some fresh night air after a heavy meal. This walk lasted about an hour. A man named Muhammad went straight home. The others coordinated their statements so that they would all match in case the police questioned them. Then they returned to their cars and drove home. In the meantime, the fire had spread so much that firefighters were initially unable to get close to the wreck. When they finally got close enough to the burned-out vehicle, they saw 2 bodies inside, those of Zaki Hussein and Hashim Ijazuddin. Their lives ended at only about 20 years old. It was believed both had died because the collision was so severe that the car broke in two and the engine tore away. It would have been impossible to rescue them before the fire broke out. Investigators quickly discovered that the car had not crashed on its own. They checked video footage from the area and also learned about Zaki's call to the emergency services. The information they received indicated that a high-speed chase had taken place. Cameras recorded how 2 cars pursued the silver Skoda carrying Zaki and Hashim. The vehicles were quickly identified and tracked down using an automatic license plate recognition system. The Bukhari women had not even returned home when police were already standing in front of their door. The Audi involved in the chase and the call May made to Zaki's phone during the chase led officers to a specific address. It was answered by May's teenage brother, who found himself accused of taking 2 people's lives before he knew what was happening. Imagine waking up in the middle of the night, opening your front door, and before you can fully see straight, you are arrested. He was confused, but as soon as he heard about the traffic accident, he began proving to the police that he did not even have a driver's license and had spent the night at home. The officers quickly realized they had the wrong person, apologized for the mistake, and let him go. The man had to take a moment to breathe and calm down, since he was stunned by another piece of news. The car accident had been arranged by his mother and sister. His mother's phone number was registered under his name. On the afternoon of February 11, 2022, the authorities returned to the Bukhari home to question May and Ansrin. Both women were in pajamas and appeared very calm. May told the investigators a completely fabricated story about where she had been that night. She claimed she actually was one of the first people to witness the strange chase. She said she had almost been injured by the actions of those on the road. May described the events that took place as if talking about a perfectly normal parking lot somewhere in the city center. She seemed very cooperative and really believed what she was saying. With gestures, she showed how the cars had moved on the highway. The only difference from what actually happened was that in May's story, she and her mother had observed a chase from a distance. According to her, she and Ansrin were in their own Audi when the car in front of them suddenly accelerated and then crashed into a guardrail. May had no idea who was in that car, as she always kept her distance from other vehicles. She also mentioned the blue car and said she got the impression that the two vehicles were in some kind of life or death struggle, with the blue limousine swerving slightly to the left, so she had to keep braking to avoid being hurt by the two drivers. Her mother had advised her to stay out of their maneuvers, but it did not always work. Unfortunately, May did not remember the license plate of the vehicle or any other identifying characteristics, not even the make of the car. When the accident happened, May said she saw the blue limousine stop, so she herself drove on, convinced that the drivers might be drunk and it would be unsafe to stop next to them. So she kept going. This behavior of the influencer during questioning said a lot about her character. She was the sort of person who would do anything to give her way. May remained calm and confident in her own story. She pretended not to know who had been driving the blue limousine and thought she could get away with it. The officers let May say whatever came to mind, knowing she was only getting more entangled in her own lies. The motive for the crime was clear from the start. Saki's parents told the police that he had an affair with an older woman whom he lovingly called Den. He even introduced her to his sister. Mother and daughter denied any connection to the deceased. Meanwhile, Ansrin had deleted all records and photos from her phone that would have shown her affair, but investigators were able to access the one Saki had stored in the cloud. Every snapshot, every video of their relationship, or whatever it was between them, revealed everything. Investigators also found phone logs showing constant calls between the drivers of the blue limousine and the Audi on the night of the accident, and they traced a call May made to Saki just before the crash. Events escalated, and 8 people in those 2 cars that night were arrested. 7 of them remain in custody. In the blue limousine were 22-year-old Natasha Akhtar, 22-year-old Sina Gula, and 27-year-old Mustafa Karwan. They were all accused of a serious crime that cost 2 young men their lives, and they all emphatically denied any involvement in the accident. The occupants and driver of the blue limousine assured officers they had been on their way to visit friends to play Monopoly. They had seen something burning on the side of the road but said it had nothing to do with them. They just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. May also stuck to her story at first, but after a while changed her tactics and admitted that her mother had indeed had an affair. Everything was fine until Saki threatened to show up at the Bakari's house and tell her father everything. May just wanted to protect her mother. That night, they wanted to give the ex-lover money so that he would leave them alone. May was worried that her mother's ex might attack them, so she asked her friend Rikan to come along. She assumed the group in the blue limousine were just Rikan's friends. She had no idea what they intended to do. May tried as hard as possible to convince the police that she was not lying this time. She said she had only lied initially because she was ashamed of her mother's affair with a young man and did not want it to appear in the news. Eventually, May even tried to convince the investigators that Saki wanted to die himself and deliberately caused the crash with Hashim. The officers were shocked by the stories the beautiful young woman told them in the interrogation room. They asked her directly, did Saki want to kill himself, and decided to take his best friend with him to the other world? May nodded and said yes. Some people managed to get away with that. The first trial was chaotic. 7 people were in the dock, most of them with their own versions of what had happened that night, varying to a greater or lesser extent. The prosecution decided to group all the defendants. May and her mother, as well as the 2 drivers, were accused separately from the other friends in the cars. Perhaps these other friends really did not know what was planned and could not influence the situation. They just wanted to hang out with their buddies and unknowingly got caught up in a tragic situation. There is not much you can do at 160 kilometers per hour, but that is not a statement of certainty, only a guess. Another complication in this case was the victims themselves. During the autopsy, a mind-altering substance was found in Hashim's blood, and he had been driving at high speed. The lawyers immediately pounced on this detail and tried to pin the blame on the victims. Accusations extended to Saki as well. It turned out that he was not the only woman's partner he had threatened when she tried to break things off with him. That witness was not related to the accused, so it did not appear she was motivated to lie on their behalf. She testified that she had met Saki in a club at a party, where he begged her for her phone number. She already had a boyfriend at the time, but gave Saki her number just to get rid of him. Eventually, Saki bombarded her with messages, called her 15 to 20 times a day, and threatened to trash her car or come to her home. The woman went to the local police 3 times because she was afraid of her new acquaintance. Overall, this information did not make Saki look good. The jury was also shown text messages he had sent Ansrin, in which he threatened to pass on explicit photos and videos to the Bukhari family or post them online if she did not answer his calls. This all sounded intimidating enough, but the messages had been taken out of context, and it remains unknown what caused these threats. Was it simple blackmail, or did Saki simply not know what to do with his rejected feelings? Unfortunately, only the young man himself could give a reliable answer to that question, but his life ended tragically. Every trial can be very difficult for the victim's family and friends. For Hashim's parents, it was especially painful because they had nothing to do with the situation. The young man had only taken the wheel to help his friend, who asked him to drive in the middle of the night to another city. As a result, he lost his life. Now his family also had to listen to accusations that the man had used illegal substances. Online users felt especially sorry for Mr. Bukhari and his son, because the family practically fell apart during the trial. Mr. Bukhari did not visit his wife while she was in custody, but he did attend several stages of the trial, probably just to support his daughter. His worst fear was that the case would become public. During the hearing, not only was his wife's affair with the 20-year-old Saki discussed, but also her first act of adultery was revealed. The prosecution argued that May, her mother, and their friend Rikan had planned together how they could get rid of Saki. The 3 of them were the masterminds of the crime, and they were the ones who lured the man to that parking lot in another city, allegedly to pay him off. It did not matter whether they planned to assault him right there or had already decided to cause an accident on the road. The result would have been the same, the threat to kill him, the pursuit of his car at 160 kilometers per hour, and the attempt to push him off the highway could only be done with one purpose in mind. From the start, the defense for mother and daughter was absurd. The lawyers insisted that the women were victims of a crazy stalker. They had only wanted to talk to Saki that night, nothing more. Although they had made some questionable, false decisions, it was Saki's fault that they felt threatened. The Bukharis simply had no other choice. Of the 8 people, only 7 were arrested. The 21-year-old Muhammad Patel, who had been in the Audi, left the group immediately after the accident. He was a key witness and was released for reasons unknown. Some online users believe he was innocent, others think he was released because he cooperated with the police. In any case, he corroborated the story consistent with the transcript of Saki's emergency call. Muhammad said that Saki really was chased at high speed. Everyone wore balaclavas so the cameras would not capture their faces. Rikayan called the driver of the blue limousine and told him to hit the Skoda from behind. The man also said that he had only joined the group at the last minute and had no idea what the others were up to or what he had gotten into. He was terrified of what was happening and ran away as soon as the opportunity arose. Whether that is really the case or not is unknown, but his testimony was very helpful in the investigation. The other 5, except for Ansrin and May, insisted they had done nothing and knew nothing. They had just gone for a drive and later played Monopoly. Each participant in that wild car chase had personal arguments for their defense. Raiz Jamal, who drove the blue limousine, said he only wanted to scare the men in the Skoda because they had been blackmailing some women, but the chase got out of control. Amir Jamal, the passenger in the blue car, claimed he did not realize what was happening. Natasha Akhtar said she was in love with the driver and therefore did not want to upset him with comments about dangerous driving. In her view, all men drive like maniacs. She wanted to become a criminal defense lawyer and therefore had no intention of going to prison. Sina Gula and Mustafa, also passengers in the blue car, said one of their fathers had cancer and that they were his only caretakers. The sick man could no longer eat, drink, or use the bathroom without help. Sina said he would never risk leaving his father on his own because of a few women he barely knew. He spent all day caring for his dying father and just wanted to get some distraction and a change from his harsh reality. When his father finally passed away, he was not even able to attend the funeral. The debate about what role all these people played in the deaths of the 2 young men is still ongoing, but the fact is that they took part in a deadly act while wearing balaclavas. Perhaps they thought it was just a fun game, a thrill, and did not see it as something terrible. Yet once they were in the pursuer's car, they automatically became accomplices to the crime. After several hearings, the jury left the courtroom, deliberated for more than 28 hours, and finally came to a verdict. Ansrin Bukhari, her daughter Mahek Bukhari, the driver of the blue limousine Raiz Jamal, and the Audi driver Rikan Karvan were found guilty of killing Hashim and Saki. Mahek was sentenced to life in prison and must serve at least 31 years and 8 months before she can request parole. Ansrin was also sentenced to life with a minimum term of 26 years and 9 months. Raiz and Rikan also received life sentences. Raiz must serve a minimum sentence of 36 years because he drove without a license, while Rikan will spend at least 26 years and 10 months in prison before being eligible for parole. Sina, Amir, and Natasha were found guilty of manslaughter and received sentences of 11 to 14 years. Muhammad was not charged with any crime. Because of the thoughtless actions of a grown woman who succumbed to the charm of a young man and lost herself in the power of romantic fantasies, several lives were affected in a negative way. Zaki Hussein was not a perfect man and certainly behaved inappropriately, but his behavior did not merit the death penalty. It is incredibly stupid and brutal to take a person's life in order to cover up your own mistake. Thank you for watching and take care of yourself.